Hey guys, it's time for chapter 11, Failing Forward. Here's the book. All right, so today is about risk and reward. So it says, take a risk, there's no other way to fail forward. While one person hesitates because he feels inferior, the other is busy making mistakes and becoming superior. Henry C. Link. Every era has its great explorers, people willing to face danger to break new ground and discover new worlds. Americans love those kind of people. The names of pioneers and daring adventurers ring throughout our history. Columbus, Crockett, Lewis and Clark, Lindbergh, Armstrong. The fuel that makes it possible for people like them to conquer new territory is risk. Pioneer aviator Charles Lindbergh emphasized that point. What kind of man would live where there is no daring? I don't believe in taking foolish chances, but nothing can be accomplished if we don't take any chances at all. So true. That reminds me of Brene Brown's Daring Greatly book. So good. And then that comes from like a quote by Teddy Roosevelt. Actually, it's like Emily's favorite quote. Um, she has it on, like, I actually gave it to her for Christmas, like a little printout of it. Um, so, anyways, I wish I thought about to grab it for you guys. Maybe I'll find it tonight. Okay, risk is a funny thing. It's very subjective. Here's what I mean. Someone may have no trouble plunging off a high tower with a bungee cord attached to his leg, but the same person may regard speaking in front of a group of 20 people as a death defying risk. To another person, speaking isn't intimidating at all. For example, I love to speak to groups, and I've spoken to groups as large as 82,000 people. On the other hand, I would never willingly bungee jump. How do you judge whether some activity is worth the risk? Do you base it on your fear? No, you should do some things that scare you. Should you base it on the probability of success? No, I don't think that's the answer either. Risk must be evaluated not by the fear it generates in you or the probability of your success, but by the value of the goal. She's a pioneer. Allow me to tell you the story of someone who pushed the envelope of risk in order to achieve goals that were valuable to her. As she grew up, there were no significant indications that Millie would someday be one of the great adventurers of the 20th century. She was an inquisitive child born in Kansas in 1897. She was bright and excelled academically. She liked reading books and reciting poetry. She also enjoyed sports, particularly basketball and tennis. After recognizing the impact of war on the soldiers who served in Europe during World War One, Millie wanted to do something to help. She decided to study nursing, and during the war, she worked as a military nurse's aide in Canada. After the war was over, she enrolled as a pre med student at Columbia University in New York. In 1920, after her first year at school was finished, she visited her family in Los Angeles. That's when she took her first plane ride at Dougherty Field in Long Beach, California, and she was hooked. As soon as we left the ground, I knew I myself had to fly. She never returned to med school. That was the beginning of a new life for Millie. Oh, I should mention that Millie is what her family called her. You and I know her as Amelia Earhart. She immediately began working odd jobs to earn the $1,000 required to take flying lessons. And soon she was learning how to fly. There's my dog. From Anita Snook, another pioneer flyer. Learning to fly wasn't easy, at least not for Earhart. She had more than her share of crashes, but she persevered. Years later, she told her husband her perspective on flying. Please know I am quite aware of the hazards. I want to do it because I want to do it. Women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, their failure must be but a challenge to others. Sorry, gotta breathe. In 1921, Earhart made her first solo flight. The next year, she set the first of her many aviation records for highest altitude. She piloted planes because she loved to fly, but she also had an agenda. She was trying to break ground for others. My ambition is to have this wonderful gift produce practical results for the future of commercial flying and for the women who may want to fly tomorrow's planes, she said. During the course of her flying career, Earhart set many records and achieved many firsts. 1928, first woman to cross the Atlantic Ocean in an aircraft as passenger. 1929, first president of the 99s, an association of female pilots. 1930, women's speed record of 181.8 miles per hour on a 3-kilometer course. 1931, first person to set an altitude record in an autogyro, which is an early helicopter, at 18,451 feet. 1932, first female pilot to fly solo over the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, so the first one was as a passenger. Okay, got it. 1935, first person to fly solo and nonstop between Oakland, California, and Honolulu, Hawaii. One more big risk. By 1935, Amelia Earhart was a seasoned world-class pilot and had done a lot to accomplish her goals of opening doors for women and legitimizing commercial aviation. She must have believed the motto of all great achievers: if at first you do succeed, try something harder. Because that's when she decided to embark on her greatest adventure. She intended to fly around the world. That feat had already been accomplished by a man, but Earhart intended to route her flight near the equator and set a record for the longest flight at 29,000 miles. In March 1935, she started on her way. She flew the first leg from Oakland to Hawaii, but as she took off from Luke Field near Pearl Harbor, she blew a tire and crashed the plane, causing tremendous damage. She had failed, but she wasn't ready to give up. Her plane was shipped to California for repairs, and she planned her next attempt. 2 years later, in June 1937, Earhart again started on her around the world voyage, this time heading east. She observed, "I have a feeling that there is just about one more good flight left in my system, and I hope this trip is it. Anyway, when I have finished this job, I mean to give up long distance stunt flying." By the end of June, she and her navigator, Frederick Noonan, had flown 22,000 miles. When they took off from New Guinea on July 2nd, they were filled with hope because there were only 7,000 miles to go, but they were never seen again. Although U.S. Navy ships searched diligently, no trace of them or their plane was found. Worth the risk. If anyone had been able to talk to Earhart during her last hours, I believe she would not have expressed any regret for attempting what she did. She once said, "Now and then women should do for themselves what men have already done, occasionally what men have not done, thereby establishing themselves as persons and perhaps encouraging other women toward greater independence of thought and action. Some such consideration was a contributing reason for my wanting to do what I so much wanted to do. To achieve any worthy goal, you must take risks." Amelia Earhart believed that, and her advice when it came to risk was simple and direct. Decide whether or not the goal is worth the risks involved. If it is, stop worrying. The reality is that everything in life is risky. If you want to avoid all risk, then don't do any of the following. Don't ride in an automobile. They cause 20% of all fatal accidents. Don't travel by air, rail, or water. 16% of all accidents result from these activities. Don't walk on the street. 15% of all accidents occur there. Don't stay at home. 17% of all accidents happen there. In life, there are no safe places or risk-free activities. Helen Keller, author, speaker, and advocate for disabled persons, asserted, "Security is mostly a superstition. It does not exist in nature, nor do the children of men as a whole experience it. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than outright exposure. Life is either a daring adventure or nothing." Everything in life brings risk. It's true that you risk failure if you try something bold because you might miss it. But you also risk failure if you stand still and don't try anything new. G.K. Chesterton wrote, "I do not believe in a fate that falls on men however they act, but I do believe in a fate that falls on them unless they act." The less you venture out, the greater your risk of failure. Ironically, the more you risk failure and actually fail, the greater your chances of success. When it comes to taking risks, I believe there are two kinds of people: those who don't dare try new things and those who don't dare miss them. So the don't dare try it people have these, hold on. There's a whole list. There's 15 things, okay? So I'm going to go from the don't dare try it people to the don't dare miss it people and just go back and forth. So the don't dare try it people, they resist opportunities. The don't dare miss it are they find opportunities. The others, they rationalize their responsibilities, they finish their responsibilities. They rehearse impossibilities, they feed on impossibilities. They rain on enthusiasm, they fan the flame of enthusiasm. They review their inadequacies, they face their inadequacies. They recoil at the failure of others, they figure out why others failed. They reject the personal cost involved, they finance the cost into their lifestyle. They replace goals with pleasure, they find pleasure in the goal. They rejoice that they have not failed, they fear futility, not failure. They rest before they finish before they rest. They resist leadership, they follow leaders. They remain unchanged, they force change. They replay the problems, they fish for solutions. They rethink their commitment, they fulfill their commitments. They reverse their decision, and they finalize their decision. So here's the motto. The motto of the I don't dare try it. I would rather try nothing great and succeed than try something great and risk failure. Or the other motto is I would rather try something great and fail than try nothing great and succeed. If you want to increase your odds of success, you have to take chances. I feel like I want to write down that list of the don't dare miss it people because I really want to become those. I feel like I have a lot of the other one and I want to change that. Traps that make people back away from risk. If risk has such great potential rewards, then why don't people embrace it as a friend? I believe they don't because they tend to fall into one or more of the following 6 traps. Number 1, the embarrassment trap. Deep down, nobody wants to look bad. And if you take a risk and fall flat on your face, you might embarrass yourself. So what? Get over it. The only way to become better is to take steps forward, even shaky ones that cause you to fall down. Little progress is better than no progress at all. Success comes in taking many small steps. If you stumble in a small step, it rarely matters. Don't gift wrap the garbage. Let little failures go. Number 2, the rationalization trap. People who are caught in the rationalization trap second guess everything they do. And as they prepare to take action, they say to themselves, maybe it's really not that important. But the truth is, if you wait long enough, nothing is important. Or as Ed's 5th rule of procrastination states, spend sufficient time confirming the need and the need will disappear. So true. Oh. Okay. Sidney J. Harris says, regret for the things we did can be tempered by time. It is regret for the things we did not do that is inconsolable. If you take risks and fail, you'll have fewer regrets than if you do nothing and fail. Number 3, the unrealistic expectation trap. For some reason, many people think everything in life should be easy, and when they find out that achievement takes effort, they give up. But success takes hard work. Consider this Latin proverb. If there is no wind, row. As you prepare to take a risk, don't expect to get a favorable wind. Begin with the mindset that you have to row. Then if you receive help, it will be a pleasant surprise. So true. Okay. Number 4, the fairness trap. When psychologist M. Scott Peck begins his book, The Road Less Traveled, with the words, life is difficult, what he is getting at is life isn't fair. Many people never learn that fact. Instead of acknowledging it and moving on, they expend their energy trying to find fairness. They say to themselves, I shouldn't have to be the one to do this. Dick Butler expands on this idea. Life isn't fair. It isn't going to be fair. Stop sniveling and whining and go out and make it happen for you. Wishing that a risk wasn't yours wishing that a risk wasn't yours to take won't make it any easier. In fact, it might make it harder. Your attitude about it is your choice. Number 5, the timing trap. Don Marquis, the famous writer and humorist, was known to be a champion procrastinator. A friend who knew of this tendency in Marquis asked him how he ever got his day's work done. That's simple, said Marquis. I just pretend that it's yesterday's. Some people tend to think that there's a perfect time to do everything, and this isn't it, so they wait. But Jim Stovall advises, don't wait for all the lights to be green before you leave the house. If you wait for perfect timing, you'll wait forever. and the more you wait, the more tired you'll get. William James wisely declared, "There's nothing so fatiguing as the eternal hanging on of an uncompleted task. Don't use timing as an excuse to procrastinate." So true. Number 6, the inspiration trap. Someone once said, "You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great." Many people want to wait for inspiration before they are willing to step out and take a risk. I find that's especially true of people with an artistic bent. But as playwright Oscar Wilde said when he was asked the difference between a professional writer and an amateur, the difference is that an amateur writes when he feels like it, a professional writes regardless. When it comes to moving forward, Bill Glass gives this advice. When you get an insight or inspiration, do something about it in 24 hours, or the odds are against you, or the odds are against your ever acting on it. Are you taking enough risks? As you examine the way you live, consider whether you are taking enough risks. Not senseless ones, but intelligent ones. Even if you don't fall into one of the 6 traps I just reviewed, you still may be playing it too safe. How can you tell? By looking at your mistakes. Fletcher L. Byram says, "Make sure you generate a reasonable number of mistakes. I know that comes naturally to some people, but too many executives are so afraid of error that they rigidify their organization with checks and counterchecks, discourage innovation, and in the end, so structure themselves that they will miss the kind of offbeat opportunity that can send a company skyrocketing. So take a look at your record, and if you can come to the end of a year and see that you haven't made any mistakes, then I say, brother, you just haven't tried everything you should have tried. If you are succeeding in everything you do, then you're probably not pushing yourself hard enough, and that means you're not taking enough risks." Another kind of risk taking. You may have trouble relating to the great explorers and adventurers from history, such as Amelia Earhart. The risk those people took may seem too different from your life situation. If so, you need to know about the life of someone whose quiet willingness to risk may seem more like your own. His name was Joseph Lister, and he was a second generation physician born in England in 1827. Back in the days when he began practicing medicine, surgery was a painful, grisly affair. If you had the misfortune of being injured and required surgery in the mid 1800s, here's what you could have expected. You would have been taken to a hospital surgical theater, a building that was separate from the main hospital to prevent the regular patients from becoming upset by the screaming. Anesthesia had not yet been developed. You would have been strapped to a table that looked a lot like one in your kitchen, under which sat a tub of sand positioned to catch blood. Your surgery would have been performed by a physician or barber, likely surrounded by a group of observers and assistants. All of them would be dressed in the regular street clothes they wore throughout the course of the day while traveling around town and treating patients. The instruments the doctor used would have been pulled from a nearby drawer where they had been placed unwashed after the previous surgery. Yeah. And if your surgeon needed his hands free while working on you, he might have held the surgical knife between his teeth. Your chances of surviving surgery would be a little better than 50%. If you had the misfortune of having your operation in a military hospital, your chances of surviving would go down to about 10%. Of surgery during that era, one contemporary doctor wrote, "A man laid on the operating table in one of our surgical hospitals is exposed to more chances of death than the English soldier on the field of Waterloo." Determined to make a difference. Like the other surgeons of his time, Lister was distressed by the death rate of his patients, but he was ignorant of the cause. However, he was determined to discover a way to save more of his patients. Lister's first major breakthrough came after he was given some writings by his friend Thomas Anderson, a chemistry professor. The papers were written by scientist Louis Pasteur. In them, the French scientist stated his opinion that gangrene was caused not by air, but by bacteria and germs present in the air. Lister thought those ideas were remarkable, and he theorized that if the dangerous microbes could be eliminated, his patients would have a better chance of avoiding gangrene, blood poisoning, and the other infections that often killed them. Innovation makes him an outcast. Because of what we know today about germs and infection, Lister's ideas may seem to be common sense. Just a second. Okay, sorry, had to deal with kids fighting. All right. I don't remember where I am. Because of what we know today about germs and infection, Lister's ideas may seem to be common sense, but his belief was radical in those days, even among members of the medical community. And when Lister, who was working at a hospital in Edinburgh, presented his beliefs to the senior surgeons, he was taunted, ridiculed, and rejected. Each day, as he made his rounds, his colleagues insulted and criticized him mercilessly. He was an outcast. Despite the rejection of his peers and an inherently gentle nature, Lister refused to back down. He continued his work on the problem, but did his research at home. For a long time, he and his wife worked in a laboratory they had created in their kitchen. The key, he believed, was to find a substance that would be capable of killing the microbes. Lister finally settled on carbolic acid, a substance used to clean the sewage system in the city of Carlisle. His preliminary research done, he was ready to test his theory, but that would require another risk, one greater than rejection by his peers. He would have to experiment with carbolic acid on a living patient, not knowing whether it would kill him. Lister determined to wait until he found the right person. It would require someone who faced almost certain death. He found his patient on August 12, 1865. An 11-year-old boy who had been run over by a cart was brought into the hospital. His leg had been so badly damaged that the broken bone had come through the skin, and his injury was more than 8 hours old. He was the kind of patient who usually didn't survive. Lister used carbolic acid to clean the wound, his instruments, and anything that came into contact with his patient. He also dressed the wound with bandages soaked in the substance. Then he waited. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, then 4 days passed. To his joy, after 4 days, there were no signs of fever or blood poisoning. After 6 weeks, the boy was able to walk again. Amid heavy criticism, Lister used carbolic acid in all his procedures. During 1865 and 1866, he treated 11 patients with compound fractures, and none of his patients contracted infections. As he continued his new procedures, he did research to improve his methods, finding additional antiseptic substances that worked even better. The result of risk. In 1867, Lister published his findings, and still the medical profession ridiculed him. For more than a decade, he communicated his findings and encouraged other doctors to adopt his practices. Finally, in 1881, 16 years after his first success with a patient, his peers at the International Medical Congress held in London recognized his advances. They called his work perhaps the greatest advance that surgery had ever made. In 1883, he was knighted. In 1897, he was made a baron. Today, if you've had any kind of surgery, as I have, you owe Dr. Joseph Lister a debt of gratitude. His risk secured our safety. Lister's risks may not look as flashy as those taken by someone like Amelia Earhart, but that doesn't matter. What he did brought great personal achievement to him and lasting benefits to others. He wasn't content with success as a doctor. He attempted something more difficult and riskier, and that's what matters. You risk because you have something of value you want to achieve. That's just another part of failing forward. So, your 11th step to failing forward, if at first you do succeed, try something harder. The willingness to take greater risks is a major key to achieving success, and you may be surprised that it can solve two very different kinds of problems. First, if you've been hitting all the goals you set for yourself, then you need to increase your willingness to take chances. The road to the next level is always uphill, so you can't coast there. Conversely, if you find yourself in a place where it seems that you don't achieve many of your goals, you may be playing it too safe. Once again, the answer is a willingness to take greater risks. It's ironic that opposite ends of the spectrum come together in the area of risk. Think about the next big goal ahead of you. Write down your plan for reaching it, then go over that plan to see whether you have included enough risks. If not, find parts of that process where you can push the envelope, take more chances, and increase your opportunity for success. So, here's the recap of the steps. Number 1, realize there's one major difference between average people and achieving people. Number 2, learn a new definition of failure. Number 3, remove the you from failure. Number 4, take action and reduce your fear. Number 5, change your response to failure by accepting responsibility. Number 6, don't let the failure from outside get inside you. Number 7, say goodbye to yesterday. Number 8, change yourself and your world changes. Number 9, get over yourself and start giving yourself. 10, find the benefit in every bad experience. And 11, if at first you do succeed, try something harder. All right. Tomorrow is make failure your best friend. Thanks guys for watching. See you later.